Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It's currently the evening of January 9th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of January 10th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, the IDF coordinator of activities in the Palestinian territories, General Rassan Alon, visited Cairo today at the head of an Israeli delegation. According to reports, his visit focused on humanitarian aid and situation in the Gaza Strip, the Philadelphia line, which is the border between Gaza and Egypt, and possibly reviving hostage exchange deals that have all been frozen since the assassination of Salah al-Aruri. Possibly relating to this, a spokesperson for Qatari foreign minister stated that Qatar is exploring different ideas and discussing with a bunch of different relevant parties ways to stop the fighting, avoid escalations, and arrive at a hostage exchange deal. Hours before recording this, the Lebanese Al Akhbar newspaper, which is an affiliate of Hezbollah, reported that Egypt's head of intelligence, Abbas Kamal, approached the leadership of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad today, asking them to immediately send delegates to Egypt to discuss the latest Israeli proposals following security delegations that were in Cairo in the last several days. The report adds that Egypt also approached Qatar with this as well, but that Hamas is reluctant to enter negotiations unless it sees a document that matches its demands. According to the report in Al Akhbar, Egypt is currently working on a formula that will be able to bring the parties to the negotiating table. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, rockets and mortars were sent today from the Gaza Strip primarily to the southern parts of Israel. Rockets targeted the areas of Sderot as well as the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip, specifically Ivim, Nir Am, Nahal Oz, and Alumim. Moving to the fighting within the Gaza Strip, in the central parts of the Gaza Strip and El Maghazi refugee camp, there was substantial IDF activity reported, including many different gun battles, and the IDF Navy is reported to have attacked different Hamas maritime infrastructure throughout the refugee camp. In the El Bureid refugee camp, as the IDF continues its activity throughout the camp, including major gun battles and securing different areas, a major explosion was heard in the camp today. The IDF reportedly was bringing in substantial explosive devices in order to detonate a vast tunnel network that was uncovered in recent days. However, during the deployment, an IDF tank fired towards Hamas operatives in the area, which caused the explosives to ignite prematurely. 6 IDF soldiers were reported killed in this explosion and 8 wounded. Moving on to southern parts of the Gaza Strip, there was substantial activity reported in Han Yunis in the last 24 hours. These include an array of gun battles throughout the city, as the IDF announced it is expanding its activities throughout Han Yunis. Major weapons caches were uncovered by the IDF, in some cases as a result of units going house to house. The IDF also raided the Islamic University in Han Yunis, which was being used, according to the IDF, as a Hamas staging ground. It uncovered guns, weapons, ammunitions, clips, as well as propaganda materials in different classrooms. There are also reports that special commando units of the IDF are operating throughout the city, uncovering dozens of different tunnel entrances, and that the IDF Navy is also participating in the attack on Han Yunis. Regarding casualties, 6 IDF soldiers were reported killed in the Gaza Strip in that incident in El Bureid in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers that were killed since the invasion began to 183. 27 soldiers are reported injured, bringing the total number of soldiers that are reported injured to 1,172. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that 126 Palestinians were killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 23,210, and there are reports of 59,167 Palestinians who are confirmed injured. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, Secretary of State in the United States Antony Blinken is visiting Israel today. In his meetings, he applied heavy pressure on elements in Israel to allow Palestinians that have been internally displaced from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip to return to their homes. Israel reportedly rejected this appeal in the different conversations, stating that it is conditioning the return of Palestinians to the north until a hostage deal is brokered. Israel did agree, however, to Blinken's request to allow a UN committee to visit the north and begin assessing how the return can be facilitated. This comes amidst reports that the U.S. State Department is trying to work with the UN to figure out how people may be able to relocate back to their homes up north, considering that the majority of homes in the north are destroyed, the entire infrastructure, electricity, water, the entire telecommunications grids are all destroyed. The UN is going to send a committee to start assessing how this can be done. Other news, Secretary Blinken also reportedly applied heavy pressure on Israel to increase the humanitarian aid that is entering the Gaza Strip from 200 to 300 trucks per day, and he added that Israel should cooperate with the UN envoy for the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip as well. He specifically mentioned the growing reports of hunger in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and that upwards of 80% of Gazans require daily humanitarian aid. Other news, the World Health Organization expressed concern today that hospitals in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip are going to begin collapsing as they did in the north. According to different reports, out of the 35 hospitals that were operating throughout the Gaza Strip, 8 are now operating at some level of capacity. These are all in the south. However, shortages of medical supplies and increased injured that keep on coming in are going to eventually lead to their collapse. This is a fear of the World Health Organization. regarding the entrance of humanitarian aid trucks. The UN reported today that 131 aid trucks carrying food, water, and medical supplies entered the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. They entered both through the Kerem Shalom crossing as well as through Rafah. Moving on to the West Bank, there was an attempted attack by a Palestinian today to stab soldiers at a checkpoint near Ramallah. He was reportedly shot and killed. In another incident, the Palestinian was reportedly killed in confrontations with the IDF north of Ramallah. Other news, substantial IDF activity was reported in vast areas of the West Bank. These included Tul Karim, Nablus, the villages of Yabed, Atara, Habla, Surif, and Ein Masbaha. In Nablus, IDF forces reportedly uncovered explosives and arrested a wanted Palestinian, and air units fired at Palestinians during confrontations. Weapons were also confiscated in the different operations, and 13 Palestinians were reported arrested throughout the West Bank, and several injured. Additional Palestinian reports that came in moments before recording this stated that the IDF is beginning a major operation in the town of Jenin. We'll learn more about this tomorrow. And some political news. During his visit to Israel, Antony Blinken reportedly applied a lot of pressure on Israel to transfer the complete sum of funds that Israel is holding from the Palestinian Authority. The ongoing issue between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Israel has not released that funds. The Secretary of State applied heavy pressure on Israel to do so. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there's substantial escalations that occurred in the last 24 hours. Rockets and missiles were sent from Lebanon, targeting vast areas of the Galilee, as well as missiles that were sent towards Ramon Naftali and Malachia. There were also repeated rounds of drone attacks and infiltrations throughout the upper Galilee and Israel. These hit the areas of Kiryat Shmona and Metula, Tel Hai, Dishon, and Mevot Hermon as well. Hezbollah also claimed responsibility for at least 8 border incidents. This is usually gun battles or mortar fire against IDF outposts throughout the northern parts of Israel. There was an attack of 2 drones of Hezbollah against the IDF's northern command base in Sfat. These did manage to crash land into the base, causing minor damage. Hezbollah claimed that this is a continued response to the various assassinations that Israel has carried out. In addition to this, the Saudi Al Arabiya network reported that Hezbollah attempted a drone attack against Israel's Karish maritime gas mining activities. However, this was not confirmed by the IDF nor any other reports. The IDF retaliated against these various Hezbollah attacks throughout the day. Substantial retaliations were reported in different regions of southern Lebanon. The retaliations included areas in the villages of Kila and Yarun, and they also specifically targeted a unit that was firing drones, and 3 Hezbollah operatives were reported killed in this retaliation. Other news, Ali Hussein Barji, who is a senior Hezbollah commander in charge of the group's air units, was assassinated today near the funeral of Wissam Tawil, who was the commander of the Radwan force that was assassinated yesterday in an operation that Israel at first did not claim responsibility for. However, then Israel's foreign minister did seemingly accidentally claim responsibility for it in an interview. Contrary to the assassination yesterday, the IDF today explicitly did claim responsibility for the assassinations of Ali Hussein Barji. In other news, among the series of meetings of Antony Blinken held in Israel, a repeated message that he heard from the Minister of Defense, the Prime Minister, and other elements is that Israel prefers a diplomatic solution to the situation with Hezbollah. However, if it cannot guarantee the safety of its citizens in the northern parts of Israel, it will be forced to act militarily. Relating to this, Deputy Leader of Hezbollah, Qasem Naim, today stated that Hezbollah does not want an all-out war, and it does not want the escalations to expand. However, it is prepared to do so if Israel does expand the escalations. Moving on to the regional developments, UKMDO reported a security incident in the Red Sea. Hours later, the U.S. announced that both the U.S. and U.K. shot down a major attack of the Houthis against different ships. These included 18 drones, 2 cruise missiles, and 1 ballistic missile that were launched against a route that had dozens of ships in it at the time. CNN reported this is one of the biggest Houthi attacks since the war began. Moving on to some of the political and general trends in the last 24 hours, the Israeli Attorney General sent warnings to ministers and members of Knesset, reminding them that calls to harm innocent civilians could be considered a criminal offense and incitement to violence in Israel. There is suspicion that the reason this is coming up now is that these calls of different ministers are going to be used, likely, by South Africa in its court case against Israel in the ICJ. Already in its preliminary submission of evidence, South Africa added different statements of ministers that were calling to burn Gaza to the ground, wipe out Gaza, kill every Gazan. Now seemingly there's concern that more and more such statements will be used as evidence against Israel, and thus the Israeli Attorney General is warning different MKs and ministers that they may be subject to criminal offenses if they continue to make such statements. Other news related to Antony Blinken's visit, he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister Gantz in the War Cabinet, and Defense Minister Gallant, as well as the head of the opposition, Yair Lapid. The significant political development in this is that some reports suggested that Blinken applied heavy pressure to keep the unity government in Israel alive, as more and more fractures are being seen between Netanyahu and Gantz. So in the last couple of days and weeks, there have been more and more reports that there is ongoing friction between the Likud and the status list that is headed by Benny Gantz, and there's speculation that at some point the government is going to fall apart. According to the United States, this would be a major blow towards both unity in Israel. It can also be assumed that the United States is concerned that Netanyahu will again be left only with his right-wing hawkish government running the war, and thus Blinken applied pressure on different elements, presumably on Minister Gantz, to stay in the government. In addition to this, Blinken also added after his visit to Riyadh that he sees potential in normalizing relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia after the war. This is very important because in the last several days there have been several statements made in the United States that suggested that the United States would like to use normalization with Saudi Arabia as a pressure valve on Israel in order to allow Israel to de-escalate the situation in Gaza. The thinking is that if the situation de-escalates, Saudi Arabia will be able to reapproach Israel for normalization. If this happens, this will further entice Israel to actually possibly withdraw from Gaza and allow Saudi Arabia to play a pivotal role, along with different Gulf countries, in rebuilding the Gaza Strip. So this is part of some regional sort of map that the United States is trying to build. Relating to this, Saudi ambassador in the United Kingdom stated in a BBC interview today that Saudi Arabia is interested in normalizing relations with Israel after the war, but that any deal must lead to the establishment of a Palestinian state. Other political news, British Foreign Minister David Cameron today stated that he is worried that Israel may have undertaken activity in the Gaza Strip that could be considered a violation of international law. Other political news in Israel specifically, there was major political upheaval after the IDF destroyed an illegal settlement in Gush Etzion in the West Bank. Right-wing elements attacked the defense minister and the IDF Central Command, and Netanyahu later put out a message stating that he ordered the military to not evacuate the homes in illegal settlements that belonged to soldiers in reserve duty or soldiers in active duty during the war. Moving on to speculation regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, German foreign minister visited Egypt today, and she stated that a reformed Palestinian Authority must have a vital role in Gaza's future, and that Hamas in this future must lay down arms. Other news relating to the future of Gaza Strip, Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated today after his meetings, I'm quoting, Prime Minister Netanyahu assured me that Israel's policies are not to encourage willful immigration from Gaza. The State Department spokesperson also added that Blinken told Netanyahu that a regional stable peace for Israel must be created, and this includes the establishment of a Palestinian state. Responding to this, Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir tweeted in English, stating, quoting, Mr. Secretary Blinken, it's not the time to speak softly with Hamas, it's time to use that big stick. Even more explicit was Minister of Finance and member of the cabinet, as well as Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich. He put out a statement rejecting nearly all of Blinken's statements, stating, and I quote, we very much value support of the United States, but when it comes to matters of our existence in our country, we will always operate based on Israeli interests. That is why we will continue to fight with full force to destroy Hamas. We will not transfer a single shekel to the Palestinian Authority that will end up in the families of the Nazis in Gaza, and we will work to open the gates of Gaza to willful immigration of refugees, as the international community did with refugees from Syria and Ukraine. So basically listing the important elements to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, de-escalating the intensity of fighting in the Gaza Strip, transferring funds to the Palestinian Authority, and avoiding Palestinian forced or willful encouraged immigration. Smotrich stated these three things are explicitly going to be Israel's policy. Relating to this, a spokesperson for Israeli Foreign Ministry tweeted that Israel is not exploring transferring Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to countries in Africa. So if we summarize Secretary Blinken's visit so far, his attempt to get assurances from Israel that it is not going to encourage forced or willful immigration of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. On the one hand, the Secretary of State said that he did get assurances from Netanyahu this is not going to be Israel's policy, and spokesperson for Israel's foreign ministry stated this is not the policy. However, other members of cabinets are saying this, in fact, is the policy. In terms of Israel's de-escalating and moving on to the third phase of the fighting in Gaza, while this is apparently happening in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, Israel announced today that it is intensifying its activity in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and Han Yunis specifically. Relating to the situation in the north, we are waiting to see developments. Amos Hochstein, who is the U.S. Special Envoy to the region, is due to arrive in Beirut next week, and we will see how this develops. And relating to the day after plan, as we can continuously see, there is currently no agreement and no concrete plan for what is going to be the day after plan, and reportedly Secretary Blinken is trying to formulate something that may involve Saudi Arabia. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.